Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, as usual, Ed Dentzel, and this is the first show for 2016. Hope everybody had a great New Year's. I don't think I mentioned this yesterday, the last show of 2015, that New Year's is like my least favorite holiday of the year, and there's several reasons for that. Some I'm willing to tell you about, and some I'm not willing to tell you about. But I've told you, I don't drink. I haven't had a drop of alcohol in a long time. I'm not into big crowds. I'm not into really whooping it up unless I go to a concert, Kiss concert, Def Leppard concert. I have a Iron Maiden concert that's coming up in about a month and a half, their first show on their new tour in the United States. So, but New Year's celebrations involve all of that. And so I'm the opposite of that. And that's why primarily I'm not a big fan. Although I did get together with some family and in a neighborhood and fun. But I ended up watching TV by myself, played with the dogs, talked to a couple people who I knew there, and then I was out of there well before midnight. So that's just New Year's to me. And like I said, there's some other reasons that I really, from my personal life going back decades, that also have to do with that, bad memories that I just want to put behind me as well. Even though it's a long time since I've fully recovered, but when this particular holiday rolls around, I just keep it very, very low-key, which is really a symbol of how really I live my life anyway. But while you're listening to the show tonight, I urge you to tweet me at Dentzel Domain, all one word, DENTZELDOMAIN, or you can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com, and of course I would urge you to do that at any point. I want to start with maybe an unusual place. I talked about, I think, this a few days ago, but I finally got to see the episode. It's the first new episode of Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. And I have seen just about every episode since he started doing this for Crackle.com, and then it has its own site for the show Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. I think Acura is the major sponsor there. It gets a lot of views, of course, where Jerry gets together with a lot of comedians that he knows who were on his show, weren't on his show, old guys, new guys, women. Julia Louis-Dreyfus has been on there. Sarah Jessica Parker has been on there. A lot of different comedians. Some you've heard of and some you haven't, but they're all pretty good. Even though Bill Maher was on there one time, Stephen Colbert, David Letterman, Howard Stern, Jay Leno. He does all these, and they just get in these fancy cars and they go for coffee, and they just talk about their lives, entertainment, comedy, anything that pops up. Well, Jerry Seinfeld's new episode is with Barack Obama, who I'm going to say is the first non-actor, non-comedian, person who isn't in show business that has been on the show, I think. I think that's the case. And it's very interesting. The entire episode is under 20 minutes. It's somewhat interesting. Even though I can't stand Barack Obama, I'm not going to tell you that I wasn't entertained. I was. And maybe the reason that I was entertained is because the show kind of supported something that I've said about Barack Obama for a long time. And it's not necessarily, well, it is something bad, I guess, but it's something that a lot of conservatives don't believe. And that is, he's a guy who is sick of being president. What I saw in that interview with him. And like I said, I think I know Jerry Seinfeld pretty well. I've watched a lot of his interviews that he's done over the years. I've seen all the episodes of Seinfeld. I've seen a lot of his stand-up on YouTube and elsewhere. I've watched most of these shows with friends of his, and they're all, most of them, great conversations. My favorite one is probably either the one with Julia Louis-Dreyfus or the one with Sarah Jessica Parker, which maybe is a little surprise, but that one was fantastic. And the one with Steve Harvey was especially good. Just guys, girls, sitting around talking. And so I think I have a handle on who Jerry Seinfeld is. And I know what he brings out in the people that he talks to. And I think it's he brings out genuineness in whoever he's talking to. And maybe he should have his own talk show, not that he'd be into that. It's obvious to me that Barack Obama is sick of his office. Now, he doesn't come out and say that in this episode. And he does make some jokes, and he does actually, I'm going to be honest, make a couple funny statements. Whether they were scripted beforehand, I have no idea. I'm hoping that Jerry Seinfeld wouldn't go along with that. He talks about, I could pick up this phone in the limo and call a nuclear submarine. That's kind of funny. And he plays along with this little skit at the beginning. But they get into a conversation. I urge you to watch it. It's free to watch. Go to comediansandcarsgettingcoffee.com. You can watch it. You don't have to pay anything. Just have to put up with an ad at the beginning and an ad at the end. And it's not going to take up a lot of your time. And I know as much as you may not like Barack Obama, I think that hopefully you like Jerry Seinfeld enough that you can give it your time, that Jerry makes up for it. And there's a point in the conversation, I'm going to say about 2/3 of the way through the show, maybe 3/4 of the way, where they're both expressing, what it's like to be the head guy and maybe not getting honesty from the people who are working around you, and maybe some of the frustrations that come with being that head guy and having the pressure. And Barack Obama asks Jerry, how do you do that? And Jerry says, you know what? I just found joy in the work. I'd never run a show before. I'd never done, just found joy of what we were doing all the long hours. And I'm paraphrasing, but you could tell that he figured out a way to have fun doing that show. And of course, then in the end, he made a lot of money. Really made money, of course, during the show, but really the money that Jerry Seinfeld made for his show was in syndication. But he said he just kind of figured it out. And you could tell that Barack Obama did not agree, not agree with it necessarily, but he wasn't doing the same thing being president of the United States. He expresses in the interview that he wishes he could be like Teddy Roosevelt, who could just go off into, the wilderness by himself as president of the United States, and nobody really even thought that much about it. And that's true. That's a true story. Barack Obama is absolutely right about that. That's true. And even more recently, that's not mentioned in the show, somebody like Harry Truman, after he was president, I think there's this story that he drove cross-country by him with his wife, and they stopped in some cafe and somewhere in the United States. Not a lot of Secret Service around him, certainly not like the way that it is today, and that was just 60-some years ago. Barack Obama, during the course of that show, expressed an interest that he just wanted to be left alone. And he's sick of all of the things that go along with being president of the United States. And dare I say it, he looked kind of rejuvenated when he finally got to sit behind the wheel of the car that was used for that episode, which was a 1963 Corvette, which is a beautiful car. But I'll get to that car in a second. But he squealed some tire, driving around. And when I was thinking, I watched the episode a couple times. And I've told you that I believe that what has been going on with Barack Obama, even though he's a crazy liberal, crazy socialist, I believe that his motivation for what he's been doing comes from just wanting to tick us off. A little bit of frustration with the job that I think is shown in this show, added to him not being respected enough also, and then a hatred for conservatives, Tea Party people in this country. It's all put together. It's not any one of those. It's all frustration. I was watching and I was thinking, you know what he's like? He is that mailman that it seems a story like that pops up every year around this time, Christmas time, where there's a lot of deliveries going on. That mailman who's just had enough, needs his job, has to keep his job, but he's frustrated with it. He's frustrated that the people on his route don't give him enough respect. Maybe there's too many dogs on his route, whatever else. And then you catch these videos of mailmen throwing packages over fences. You've seen those. Seems like that story pops up every year. Depressed, frustrated, down in the dumps, something not going in that guy or that woman's life, and that's what they do. Well, with Barack Obama, he's like that mailman. And what he's been doing recently is like that mailman throwing packages over the fence. Just doesn't give a dang in the world. Now, when you're a mailman, and of course, I'd rather a mailman do that than show up at work and shoot the place up, as it seems like that used to happen. Going postal, where do you think that term came from? But that is who Barack Obama is now. And I think it's come from him finally encountering people who aren't as dazzled by him. The truth is, in the interview, came across pretty much as a regular guy, but if you didn't know he was president of the United States, forget them sitting in the limo and being in the Oval Office and the rest of it. They were just, if Barack Obama was a comedian, let's say, and Jerry Seinfeld knew him, and they got together just out in some city, New York, Chicago, Las Vegas, L.A., just in a regular car. Barack Obama never been president. He was just a comedian on the circuit. And that interview happened. I'd be looking at that comedian, Barack Obama, and saying, he seems burnt out to me. He seems like a guy who wishes he wasn't on the road doing these shows anymore. He does, even though he's doing it and he has big crowds and people are laughing, he himself is not getting a lot of joy out of the job. Which, once again, is something that I've said for a long time. And it could be the reason that in so many of these instances, I've told you, he just doesn't want to deal with it. Just doesn't want to deal with any of this. And if he's going to deal with any of it, it's going to be, the only joy, there's no joy of showing up and doing the people's work and trying to make the country better. The biggest joy I think Barack Obama now gets out of his job now is ticking us off any way he can. I urge you, I'm going to link to it at edwarddentzel.com. I've already told you where you can find it. comedianincarsgettingcoffee.com. And I urge you to watch it. And I'd love to hear your response to this. Because this is, with Barack Obama and him being in office almost 7 years now, this is the most in-depth look at him that has happened in the last 7 years. Truth be known, and it gets done by Jerry Seinfeld, a guy who I may say has been in entertainment for almost 40 years and is pretty much kept out of the political side. He just doesn't want to deal with it. We know how this year he's come out against the political correctness culture, which is awesome. He just is a guy who doesn't want to get caught up. Now, I would ask him, if he's going to do one with Barack Obama, it would be kind of funny if he went and did one with Donald Trump. I just wonder if Donald would do that. It probably might go a little bit like the Barack Obama one. Now, or is he going to do one with Ted Cruz? Or could he do one with George W. Bush? We'll see, to kind of try to even everything out, being that it is an election season. What if he did one with Hillary Clinton? That would be fantastic. But Barack Obama, though he hasn't done a lot of media events. He does the correspondence dinner. He gets up and, reads jokes that other people have written. He goes on ESPN, but all of those guys and women are kissing his butt. Well, Jerry Seinfeld, you watch it, Jerry Seinfeld does not kiss Barack Obama's butt. He doesn't take any of his crap. They are just two guys talking. And that is the only time you're probably ever going to see that happen. And so you should watch it and not just hear the words, but look at Barack Obama's body language. You watch that and you tell me, of those two guys, who is happier? Who is having more fun in his life? Who feels like he is getting more done? Who is a happy warrior and who isn't? I think it's a stark contrast. And like I said again, you get to see Barack Obama in a way that we've never seen him before. I know he's gone on talk shows, but it's all scripted. Very, very interesting. Now, there's a couple other points regarding all of this that I thought were funny. And it's interesting how Jerry Seinfeld, it was like Jerry was giving Barack Obama kind of a backhanded compliment at the introduction of the show. Because at the beginning of every show, Jerry introduces the car that will be used for that episode. And he's had some fantastic cars on that show in the last 4 years. For Ferraris, Porsches, old Chrysler products, British sports cars, Mercedes, rare Mercedes-Benz, all different types. And he used it, like I said before, a 1963 Corvette, which in any world is a fantastic car. But the funny thing, and the car is supposed to be, in these episodes, indicative of how Jerry views that person he's going to interview. For example, with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, he used a Aston Martin, James Bond's Aston Martin from back in 1963, 1964. And the reason he said, is because he considers Julia Louis-Dreyfus the James Bond of comedy, who, she can fix any problem with comedy, just like James Bond can. Well, Jerry Seinfeld introduced the Corvette as being, it's not the fastest, it's not the, what did he say, the most engineered, it's not the fastest, it's not the most well-built, it's not the most popular, or he goes through all these things. It's not this, it's not that, it's not the most expensive, everything, but it's the coolest. And isn't that who Barack Obama is? It felt to me, and you'll have to watch it for yourself, it felt like a backhanded compliment to me. Because the truth is, those old Corvettes from the 60s were known to be, they were great cars if you could keep them running. They wanted to overheat, of course, hard on gas. To ride in one would absolutely kill your kidneys. Not the greatest engineer, not a great engineering necessarily achievement, except that it looked cool. Is there any better representation of Barack Obama than that? Coolest president, Jerry Seinfeld says, ever, but when it comes to the actual mechanicals and getting work done and things like that, Barack Obama isn't your guy. Looks cool. And in cars, maybe that's all that matters, but when it comes to the presidency, it needs more than that. So as I watched it, I watched the beginning of that show. I watched the whole show twice, but I watched the beginning of that 5 or 6 times. And every time I got the same impression. He's kind of, in so many words, making fun of Barack Obama and how he views him. I wonder, once again, if you watch it, that you'll get the same impression. But it was, I know I've used this word, it was fascinating. I'm going to say I really enjoyed it. I don't like the guy. But I made the tweet yesterday after watching it that there's no doubt in my mind that when the two of them were sitting in that limo, Barack Obama thought he was the funnier guy there than Jerry Seinfeld. As I've told you, I think Barack Obama, in any room he walks into, he thinks he's the smartest. He thinks he's the coolest. He thinks he's the funniest. He thinks he's the best at everything. And here he is in a limo with maybe the greatest comedian in late 20th, early 21st century, Jerry Seinfeld. Definitely the guy who's made the most money from comedy. And probably Barack Obama's sitting there in that limo thinking, I'm funnier than this guy. Probably. I thought it was kind of funny. But I urge you to watch it. I know it went on for a long time about this, but I think it's important. Because I think that we can learn something as conservatives about how we view liberals, liberal politicians by watching something like that. And I think that if you are honest with yourself, if you have a particular opinion about why Barack Obama is doing what he does and who he is, I think you're going to see in this show a guy who comes across in a few ways as being beaten down a little bit. When they really, not at the beginning where it's a little scripted and everything, but when they're just sitting there and they're sitting there at the table, just two of them in the kitchen of the White House. I don't know if that's in the basement. I have no idea. But he looks like he's a guy that is looking for a new career. Just saying. Let's move on to something else. My dad had called me a couple days ago. And he had gotten an email from one of his friends. And this story concerns how badly we want to hate the other side. My dad had gotten a story in his email about this allegedly true story about how the company UPS, United Parcel Service, is shipping refugees into this country on their planes. It's like smuggling. The government is using a private company, their planes, or maybe even the government painted a plane to look like a UPS plane. I guess that's possible. And is trucking in all of these illegal immigrants from Syria, wherever else, all these Muslims, into the United States. He'd gotten this email from one of his friends. I don't think he ever did tell me where he got it from, but he said he got it in his email. And he asked me, Ed, is this true? And I said, Dad, I don't think it's true. And I never heard of that story before. And as you know, research is allowed for this show. And I've never run across that show. Of course, I stay away from those sites that I consider to be conspiracy sites, what we would call, I guess, black flag sites, Area 51 sites. I just do not get into that stuff. And if you're listening to this show for the first time and you're into that stuff, and that's what you want to hear here at this show, you're not going to hear it. But I totally dismissed it, and I gave him some reasons why. I told him if it was such a big story that I think I would have heard about it in just my usual trips around the internet. But I got the idea from my dad that he wanted to believe it. And that's the reason, because I'm thinking to myself, if he didn't believe it, he wouldn't have called me. So there must be a part of him that thinks it does believe it, so he wants to call me and find out if it's actually true. to kind of reinforce what he's already thinking. Like I said, if he thought it was some kook story, he wouldn't bring it up to me. So after I got off the phone, I got interested in where this came from. So I started looking around. Now, we know, first of all, why that kind of story would resonate, right, with us, with our side. Because it kind of hits every data point. It's like a checklist. You go to the grocery store. I got to hit this, got to get this, got to get that, got to get this, got to get that. Smuggling, government conspiracy, Syrian refugees, Islam, illegal immigration, H-1B visas, all of these stories that were hot topics in the year 2015. And so this kind of story would, hits all of that. And don't you know, the best lies in the world, as I told my dad, are the ones that are based on truth. It's kind of even along those lines. You tell a big enough lie that people will start believing it, especially if you can just get a couple little things here and there that people will say, well, yeah, I know that's true. I know it's true. Well, this story, this must be true. So I started looking it up, and I found, when I did that site, UPS Smuggling was the search. I found several stories about it. And all of them from the exact sources that you would think. Sources that are all about conspiracies and black helicopters and on and on and on. But that wasn't enough for me, because I think my dad had told me that there was a video actually of these Syrians getting off this plane and being put on these buses, and then some private citizen following these buses. There was a video out there of it. So I started looking for it. And I found it. And I'm going to link to it at edwarddentzel.com, and you can judge for yourself. First of all, you should know, it doesn't show anybody getting off any planes. It doesn't show an airport. It doesn't show a jet. It doesn't show a UPS jet. It doesn't even show a sign for the airport. It's just a guy cruising along at night on a highway somewhere. He has a southern accent. I'm going to say he was videotaping it on his phone. And up in the distance are two buses. And this guy is doing is talking about how I just followed these buses. I was at the airport. I saw these refugees get off this UPS plane and got on these buses, and now I'm following. This is what's going on in this country, and you guys better wake up, on and on and on. Now, you should know some things. Now, once again, you can watch it for yourself. What at first tipped me off, that the video itself has only been watched like 4,000 sometimes, which is nothing. You'd think if it was some video that really rang true with people, and it actually said what it was, if it showed what it said it was going to show, that it would be in the millions of views. Heck, there are disc golf aces, hole-in-ones out there that have 500,000 views, just by way of comparison, a sport that most people haven't even heard about. This thing has 4,000 views. That's it. Now, maybe it'll get some more views now that I'm giving it some attention. But all this guy, the funny thing in this video, it doesn't show any of that. It's just a guy on the road at night following these buses. Doesn't videotape anything at the airport, allegedly, if he was even there. And he's following these buses. Do you know that he doesn't even follow the buses to their destination? He just stopped the video right in the middle of the whole thing. Now, I know my personal phone. I had to get a new phone. I broke my screen on my phone a couple days ago. I got a new phone. I can videotape like 6 hours on my phone. I'm going to take for granted this guy could too. This guy could too. Why didn't he do that? Why didn't he follow those buses to their destination? If it's such a great story, who cares if he has to go to work, pick up his kids, visit his kid in the hospital? That's a pretty big story. And see where these buses go. No, he didn't do that. Just flipped it off, just said, yep, these two buses hold Syrian refugees. I saw them get off a UPS jet, and that's it. And from that video, which really shows nothing, these stories got created. Now, I'm going to go to the break. I want to continue this after the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
You're listening to Red State Talk Radio, America's premier conservative talk radio network.
You critics don't define our honor. You try to shame us for doing our job. You teach children to fear us, crowds to attack us, and good people to doubt us. But we will never back down from our sworn duty to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. We wake up every day, put on our badge, strap a gun to our hips, kiss our families goodbye, and put our lives between the law-abiding and any criminal who threatens their rights. We serve people of every color and creed, men, women, and children in violent, dangerous neighborhoods, because they have the same right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as CEOs, movie stars, and the political elite. We are Americans, and we are the American police officer. We stand with the National Rifle Association of America, and the NRA stands with us. Together, we're freedom's safest place.
I know. We Christians are just as bad as Muslims who fly planes into buildings and video themselves sawing people's heads off and beheading kids and mutilating women and shooting people who draw cartoons. That's right. You better be just as wary of us Christians, because we don't mess around. Don't be insulting our Jesus, because you think Muslims are bad. Oh, man, don't push us. You think the Muslims are bad when they prey on people for insulting Muhammad? You're really going to get it when Christians pray for you for insulting Jesus.
It could be easy to take what we have for granted and not appreciate everything the men and women of law enforcement do for us every day. So to all my heroes out there, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you for protecting my family,
my business,
my kids,
our community.
Thank you for listening to us,
for being there for me, for keeping me safe.
To all those in law enforcement, thank you.
This is Primo Mondoni, host of the Red State Town Hall. Join me Sundays at 11 p.m. Eastern on Red State Talk Radio, the dominant force in conservative internet talk radio. So, lock it in and rip the knob off.
This is Paul Preston, host of Agenda 21 Radio. Join me Monday through Friday on Red State Talk Radio, the dominant force in conservative internet talk radio. So lock it in and rip the knob off.
And we're back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I want to continue to talk about this story regarding the UPS and the alleged smuggling of illegal immigrants, Syrian refugees into the United States using their jets, some sort of government conspiracy. And there is a larger point to this. I'm not just doing this kook story for no reason. Now, as I said before the break, here's a guy who was videotaping this and could have followed those buses to their destination, didn't do so. Doesn't give a reason that he shuts off the video. Nothing. Just shuts it off. They're just out on a regular highway. He could have followed them wherever they were going to go. Even if they went to a military base, he could have followed them to that military base. I know he wouldn't be able to get in, but then he'd be able to say, well, I followed these buses to this military base. There is no proof of anything on that video. Nothing. Except that guy's word. This is no different than when somebody videotapes a UFO and says, look, it's a UFO. Well, maybe. Not, but it's certainly not because you say so, the person who's videotaping it. Certainly not for that reason. And see, I'm a total doubter. This is why I don't fall for conspiracies, because I start thinking it from just everyday point of view. So if they're smuggling these people in on UPS planes, how is it that they are offloading these planes in a place where your average citizen could see it happen? If they're so worried if it's smuggling and it's a conspiracy, why do it out in the open? Especially in an era where everybody has a video camera on their phone, or at least a camera of some decent quality on their phone. Did the guy just happen, this guy who did this videotape, did he just happen across this, or did he know it was going to happen? And if so, if he knew it was going to happen, how did he find out that that UPS plane had those people on it? Something that he never explains in that video. Nothing. And once again, he doesn't, after all of that, gets on the highway, the buses are far ahead. He zooms up to follow the buses, gets close, doesn't even follow them to their destination, doesn't get their license plates, doesn't show the sides of the bus. You can't even tell what's written on the sides of the buses. Couldn't do that at night, even though it's dark. Nothing. And from that, the story that my dad got started. Now, see, my dad is, I don't believe, on any conspiracy email list. We all get weird emails. There's nothing we can do about that. But I would say that my dad is not going to go to some site that has kooky material on it, put his email in there to get a newsletter from them every week. Let's put that as an example. But he got it from one of his friends. I don't know who. So obviously, that conservative who sent that to my dad obviously believes that story. Why send it? And so that conservative got it from somewhere else. So I'm going to say that there are many, many conservatives who got that story and probably believed it and passed it on to other people. And see, my whole point about this, and is like I told my dad when we were talking about it, is that you cannot allow your hate to get in the way of critical thinking. Now, if you think about it, some other kind of conspiracy story you may get in your email, and you research it, and if you do some investigation into any of this, and you find it to be believable, then okay, we could talk about it. But I'm going to guess that most people who got that story just took it as being true, didn't do one bit of investigation themselves. Why? Because they want to believe the story. Remember, the left can screw us over a couple different ways. They can misdirect us by false stories that we don't like. But they can also misdirect us by false stories that we do like. And actually, that's probably even worse. And that probably even goes even further because we want to believe it. Now, I don't know who this guy was that did this. The videotape this. I think that even watching this videotape, that the site that I watched it on YouTube wasn't even the original person who filmed it. I don't think. But it's gotten a lot of credibility, and it shows nothing. But a lot of conservatives have bought into it, and that is not who we are supposed to be. You get a story like this, it literally took me, and I don't use that word literally very often because I know it's a cliche. It literally took me less than 5 minutes to discover how fraudulent this story is. That what it is based upon is nothing. Now, if somebody wants to show me a video, email me a video of, if there is a longer video that shows the beginning and the end of the video that I watched, then okay. And if it shows a UPS plane and a bunch of Syrians walking off of it and getting onto those buses and it's unedited, it goes like a half hour, hour long, and the buses end up in I don't even know what state this was taken in. I have no idea where any of this happened. If it ends up, the buses end up at a block in Atlanta, and those same people get off and they just kind of disperse into the city, no documentation, nothing, then okay. But if you're going to just show me Act 2, if this were a play, and you don't show me Act 1 and Act 3, then you know what? I don't know if I'm going to believe your play. I'm going to be able to create lots of different scenarios about what actually went on. And none of them, if you watch the video and there's no video, if there's no audio on it, it's just a guy following a couple buses on a highway at night. That's all it is. Which somebody who's in conspiracy theories wants to really screw the right over and make them look stupid, he could do that. The video is like 4-some minutes long. All he has to do is, hey, we come up with this great story. All we have to do is go out on the highway, find a couple buses, just so we don't get close enough, so we don't have the license plate, we don't show the sides of the bus, and I'll just start talking, saying how we saw this UPS plane land, and it's going to be great, and the right's going to just go nuts over it. They're thinking like that all the time, people. If you don't know. See, when I think of this, I also think of, I'm just going to say it, somebody like Donald Trump. When your fear, your anger get in the way of your critical thinking, that you will believe anything. The only way that story that my dad got gets passed around is if a lot of people believe it. Probably a lot of people who necessarily don't believe in others' conspiracies. Maybe Lee Harvey Oswald shot JFK. TW-800 got blown up by a central fuel tank, by a spark that was caused and ignited the gas in there, and it blew the plane up. But then on this, because they want to believe it, because so many people are ticked off about the United States' attitude, the administration's attitude, and too many people's in Congress' attitude toward immigration, that they will get off on these tangents of things that aren't true. And that is wasted time. It's wasted effort. I mean, how many conversations do you think have taken place since this video came out? My dad just got it a couple days ago. This video, I believe the date on it was uploaded to YouTube on November 15th of 2015. So it's been around for about a month and a half. So I'm sure a lot of people will be talking. If it continues to last 45 days later, it means that it's on some conservative's conscience. It's in the conscience, the consciousness. I'm going to get these words right sooner or later, people. The consciousness of conservatives, that they keep passing it along. And that's why I've tried to tell you, anything that you hear, even if you like it, you must research it further. That would go for anything that you read or hear anywhere else, and that goes for what you hear here on this show. I would never tell you that I know sometimes I say, trust me. But I urge you, anything that I talk about, and that's why I show where I get my stories, and I give you links, and I tell you where I'm reading. I tweet that out. What I'm reading from my Twitter accounts, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between, where I'm reading information, where I'm going. And you can read it for yourself, see if it's believable, and then you can go for wherever you want to from there. This is one of the, remember that Senator Phil Gramm from Texas? I remember, I don't believe he was the guy who came up with this, but he said 20 years ago, he was talking, I think he had a daughter, he was telling her, facts are not meant to be remembered. Facts are meant to be researched. Something like that. Meaning, even if you're told information, you should go out and search it for yourself, find out more about it, and see if it makes sense to you. And the only way that this email can continue being passed along is because a lot of conservatives just chose to believe it and didn't take 5 minutes out of their day to see if, well, it might not be as true as they thought. That tells me something. And that is where we are, unfortunately, as conservatives. Have a lot of great ideas, good values, but we can be tricked because we've allowed our emotions to get in the way of our critical thinking. This story is a perfect example of that. And I think that's one more reason why Donald Trump continues to do well. He's talking about immigration, how tough he's going to be on it, and there's no proof of that at all. None. None. That he's Hillary's worst nightmare? None. None of it. But people believe it because they want to. No proof. Let's move on to something else. Ben Carson, I guess I have to talk about him again. He hasn't necessarily ditched, but his campaign manager, whose name is Barry Bennett, Bennett, and his deputy campaign manager, Lisa Cohen, Coen, have quit. Now, I don't know if they were going to be eventually fired, if they saw that coming. Read a couple stories. I think this is from the Washington Post. But they kind of saw the writing on the wall regarding his campaign. And I think they were a little ticked off about how Armstrong Williams, who is Ben Carson's business manager, the kind of control that he's been exerting over the campaign. So it sounds to me like there's been this tussle going on between like the political people who were hired to get Ben Carson votes and Armstrong Williams and maybe some others who have been longtime friends, have been doing business with Ben Carson for years, if not decades, and are more worried about Ben Carson, the product, as in product, person for future business opportunities outside of politics. And Ben Carson recently had done an interview saying that maybe the campaign, I'm looking at all angles regarding who's in my campaign, maybe a shakeup, made a comment, something like that. There was a story out there, and I think this is the reason that these two eventually quit, that Ben Carson was going to get rid of his communications director, as if that is really the problem with Ben Carson's campaign. Now, maybe none of this is a surprise because since about October, Ben Carson's numbers have been going down, 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 down. In fact, they probably correlate very closely with the terrorist attack in Paris. In that, being that Ben Carson hasn't shown a good handle on foreign policy questions, and then we have a big foreign policy problem with several people murdered, that people start thinking, that Ben Carson guy, I don't know. But what's interesting to me is that you have to remember it's going to take maybe a few days, a week to really find out the truth regarding all of this. Because as I told you, Ben Carson has been spending money like it's going out of style. I told you that he raised $8 million, something like that, in October, but he spent over $9 million. Now, was that the campaign manager's fault? Was that the deputy campaign manager's fault? Was it Armstrong Williams' fault? We just don't know at this second. It could be that these two people got fired because they wanted to get the spending under control, and Armstrong Williams wanted, and the others wanted to keep spending. Or it could be the opposite. These two wanted to keep spending the money, and Armstrong Williams and the others didn't want them to do it. So we just don't know. All you know is Barry Bennett is saying that Armstrong Williams is the problem. Now, see, this is interesting to me, and you know that I've been speaking badly about Ben Carson as a politician, not as a man, but as a politician since February last year. I'm going to say. Just saw this guy, just doesn't have it. But what is interesting to me that Armstrong Williams, who is Armstrong Williams? He is a guy who has been a conservative media leader for 20 years. 20 years. He is one of those who falls into that group that I've started to talk a lot about in the last few months. People who have made a lot of money off of conservatism, preaching it, the conservatism going nowhere. And to me, you as your normal conservative out there, you have to start asking some serious questions about the leadership that we have. Not in government, but in the punditry. So Armstrong Williams has been around politics, conservative politics, over 20 years, 25 years. I mean, I can remember him doing interviews 20 years ago, like on C-SPAN or something like that. And here he is running the campaign, being the business manager for a guy who's going into the basement. His numbers are going into the basement. And you have these people who have left the campaign complaining about this guy. And this doesn't sound, at least not yet, to me like a conservative versus moderate. This wasn't, at least at this point, a story like, well, Barry Bennett's more of moderate, and he wanted to, he thought that Ben Carson needed to moderate his views a little bit, maybe move to the center a little bit to get more people. And then the Armstrong Williams, who's the more conservative person, wanted Ben to stick to, the right side, the far right side of politics. And so those two had a disagreement, Armstrong and Barry, and that's why Barry left. That doesn't sound like what's going on here. I don't think this was a difference in ideology. This was a difference in what the campaign was doing. Just financially, structurally. And why is it that Ben Carson has not been a very good speaker? Kind of when he's being himself, he's fine, but when he starts talking issues, that he just can't cut it. And you would think that if Ben Carson has a guy who's been around conservatism for over 20 years, been the best-known leader in conservatism, Ben Armstrong Williams is known, how is it that the candidate that he's behind can't cut it? Why is that? Now, there's also the allegation within this story, and you'll find it elsewhere, that Armstrong Williams, it's all about setting Ben Carson for when this is over. And that's what I've tried to say, is it just gets this, I just get this feeling that Ben Carson doesn't want to be there anymore. And he's raised the money, he's raised his profile, now he can sell some books, his speech fee can go up, and that's what I've thought for a while. And maybe it could be that Barry Bennett, Lisa Cohn have finally seen the writing on the wall regarding that as well. Oh, this isn't a real campaign, this is something else. It also shows you one more thing that I tried to warn all of you who are supporting Ben Carson since last year, that conservative political instincts stink. Remember, he was the front runner at one time, and now he's going nowhere. And I tried to tell you, I thought this was going to happen. Not necessarily this way, but I thought it was going to happen. I tried to tell all of you. You just didn't see. You didn't see what I saw. Well, maybe now you do. But before I leave you today, I want to remind you can find my books at Amazon.com. Just do a search for Edward Dentzel, my Govicide series, and my book Distant. They're science fiction with a little political commentary mixed in, conservative political commentary, of course. You can download them to your Kindle in a matter of moments. You can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. You can follow me on Twitter. Dentzel domain, all one word, no space in between. EdwardDentzel.com is where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows, along with the links to the news articles that I use for those shows. You can find my highlight reel there. You can go to edwarddentzel.com/book to get the first chapter of my next book for free. The Comebacks is the title of that book. You may like it. Get that chapter for free. It's going to come out sometime in 2016. You can also find my show at Podbean, SoundCloud, and YouTube. You can also find the show in the iTunes store in the podcast section. And and you can join me at LinkedIn and on Facebook. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight, and I'll talk to you again very soon. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.